Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. The U.S. Justice Department and the New Jersey Commission of Investigation recently released a scathing report on the care of veterans at veterans' homes in New Jersey. The report found that those living at the New Jersey Veterans Memorial Homes at Menlo Park and Paramus faced inadequate care that was shockingly deficient. The report also found that homes were not prepared to keep those residents safe during the COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in dozens of deaths. Now, these facilities are operated by the state's Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, each with just over 300 beds. State officials are now promising better care, including my first guest. State Senator Joe Cryan is a Democrat who represents the 20th Legislative District, and we welcome him to the show. Senator Joe Cryan, it's good to see you.
Laura, it's good to see you today, too, and thanks for shining a light on the topic.
Well, you are on the Committee for Military and Veterans Affairs, so let's start at the beginning. How did we get here?
Well, we got here through multiple series of bad things happening, of bad steps that weren't corrected on time. But the impetus for us today are the two reports that you mentioned in the opening. And shocking isn't a term that I think most folks who have read the reports, matter of fact, anybody who's read the reports would agree with. We lost lives. Employees literally left the job on time after time. We didn't take repeated, obvious steps in terms of PPE. We didn't provide the type of cares that our veterans deserve. And as a result of that, we're in a position today where we've got significant changes proposed, agreement on those changes and how we implement them. So I think for the folks that are hearing us today, and especially if they have a veteran in the care of the state of New Jersey, what they should understand is today that care is focused and and certainly better than it's been. But there are even more improvements on the way with the suggestions that we're proposing. And Laura, if I can, I'm sorry. There are 3 veterans homes in New Jersey. You mentioned Menlo and Paramus, which are the focus of the Department of Justice report and the SCI report. But to be clear, and just to make sure that folks are clear, those in South Jersey, in particular the Vineland facility, because of the layout, the construction, for a variety of different reasons, really aren't a focus of what we're doing here, although they'll be part of the overall solution.
Can you talk a little bit about, the care of our veterans is something that people have talked about for a long time. So perhaps some of the findings are very shocking, but not necessarily, because people have complained over the course of the years about the inadequate care that our veterans receive. And these are people, who have put their lives on the line, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, and then this is the care that they get. So when you were reading through the report, what was going through your mind?
And obviously want to echo that sentiment, right? I've heard repeatedly cherished heroes, and that's correct, right? So when you look at it, I think there's a few things: the amount of deaths and whether they were avoidable, and certainly I think there's some debate about that. There's been a court case that has settled some of it. So in the ultimate type of discussion, that needs to be first and foremost. But with that understanding and that premise, I mean, Laura, there was an individual who fell over 20 times and yet never had their treatment plan changed. There were folks that complained repeatedly about the lack of PPE. Nothing ever happened. Lack of masks utilized by both staff. The commingling of folks who had been detected with COVID and folks who had not, literally put into the same room. I mean, there are things there that you read and you look and you say to yourself, how could it happen? But I think most importantly for us is the lack of a follow-up. Nobody had the crisis understood in March of 2020. Nobody did, right? But the idea that we didn't take quick and appropriate and responsive actions is what's most alarming in the report. Now, ultimately, we got some things better. Let's be clear. I'd be comfortable today putting a relative in a veteran's home in New Jersey. I think New Jerseyans should understand that that's the case today. So we have reacted in a manner, but certainly not a timely or efficient one.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the role the legislature plays in this and what specific actions that you plan to take to address the issues that are raised in the report? And you're not alone in wanting to address this. There are other colleagues, as well as the governor, who's saying, hey, we need to take action.
Right. Well, the good news is that from the legislative standpoint, there's an agreement with the executive branch, with the governor, in terms of a process moving forward, how we get there. How we get there, the devil's in the details. But we've agreed on the following. And when you mention other legislators. Joe Vitale, for example, has been a partner in this. Joe Laganga. Ben Gopal has certainly been vocal. Cleo Tucker in the Assembly has certainly had her voice heard. So there have been a number of us that have advocated for the bifurcation of DMAVA, as you mentioned in the opening, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. So to split DMAVA, and how do you split it? Well, DMAVA is responsible, just like if you think about it on the federal level, we have a Department of Defense that handles the military, but yet we have a Veterans Administration that handles the service of our veterans and their health care. And the idea is very similar to that, to bifurcate DMAVA, to move nursing home care and some of the other healthcare type of healthcare type of services that DMAVA provides, and to put that into its own separate cabinet level department that would include in the short term a federal monitor to make sure that that happens appropriately, and a veterans advocate in the long term so that this type of situation never happens again. It's complex.
Well, that just kind of leads, who is best equipped to help and oversee their treatment? I mean, you have this report, alarms have been raised. This isn't the first time. Who is that?
In our opinion, and I want to emphasize, while there's a philosophical agreement to move forward, the devil is in the details. The intention is to bring in professional nursing home operators that understand this business, that it's what they do and their mission and their calling, and they're credentialed. The folks that run DMAVA today are military professionals. Now, I will tell you, the General, Lisa Howe, is a medical doctor as well, and has certainly brought that perspective to it. But in the long term, those are folks that are dedicated to the Guard and to the services and the provision of the military and their needs for New Jersey. What we want to do now is bring in healthcare experts to run the nursing homes, to provide the kind of quality care that's there, and quite frankly, to move that forward to a next generation, next level, world-class type of service. Yeah. I mean, Laura, they don't have electronic medical records. And as anybody who's gone to a doctor's office these days knows that when they see the back of the doctor because they're typing, those type of things will only be in place. They'll be in place soon in December. But we've gone through too long of a period of time of not being remotely progressive, and we need to become progressive now.
How did this happen, though? Like, how do you get to the root cause of the deficient care? I mean, the fact that there are no electronic records. I mean, right, you go in the healthcare system, people are not communicating with each other. You have to be your own advocate. And here, this is a population who was an advocate for all of us, putting their lives on the line, and who's speaking up for them? What is the root cause, and how do you address that?
We think the root cause fundamentally, and I'll speak a little bit, Joe Vitale and I have had a number of conversations, is communication. We think we just simply haven't focused enough, talked enough, and been part of making sure that the heroes among us get the care that they deserve. So what we're doing is the idea is to create this veterans advocate, much modeled, by the way. Years ago, New Jersey split the Department of Youth and Family Services, you may recall, in 2000, in the early 2000s, after a particularly horrific case, much like the DOJ report today on the veterans, and created a child monitor for a long period of time, child advocate, excuse me. Much like that, use that to be an impetus to split. How did it happen? It happened because we just, over a long period of time, in some cases, didn't listen to the employees, who will have a voice in this process. No employee is going to lose their job, so to speak, but they need better training. They need better leadership, stronger leadership. And as a result of that, engaging all folks as part of the care, and most importantly, the residents. Today as we talk, they're still cleaning up a mold problem in Menlo Park. Think about that. Yeah. Right? It's an horrific thought. It's still part of the process. So we need to engage in terms of facilities, in terms of management. The idea that nursing home operators who do this on a consistent, long-term basis will be able to identify problems before they, for lack of a better way to put it, bloom out of control, is something that we need to do. And that's what we're going to make sure we do.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a fear for people reporting, and how do you build that trust back if people said, hey, I did try to speak up and I was afraid I was going to lose my job? Because, you can understand in a bureaucratic process, there's a lot of red tape. to cut through, and it's almost, I don't want to say a learned helplessness. I'm not sure what the exact word is, but building back trust for those who may still be working there and who have been there, done that, and might even be approaching this report with a little bit of skepticism.
Or a lot of skepticism, Laura, in some cases, right? Yeah. There's a culture, and the report talks to it. The DOJ report is horrific. And one of the things it talks about is this culture that you just mentioned, this culture of not being able to come forward with an issue, of blaming the messenger, so to speak, right? And then for residents that are fearful of bringing forth any sort of issues under the fear that they'll be somehow penalized as a result of that. Now, whether all that's true or not, there's certainly that culture and that fear is ingrained in some of the folks here. So we need to change it. It needs dramatic change. One of the things you do is you create a voice. A veterans advocate is one of the discussions that we're having. I mentioned that to you. An ombudsman is another place where you can call anonymously, contact anonymously, and be able to make sure that your issues are heard. We are going to have something in place that allows for those that live in a fear of a culture that hopefully we change, if we ever fall back, that they have a voice and a place to go to so that we don't allow it to continue. Look, we didn't keep our eye on the ball here, right? And we allowed folks to create these fiefdoms, right? Frankly, not invested in time in terms of technology and in terms of training for the folks on the front line. We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it for the long term.
One final question. Do you have a bit of a timeline when you talk about patients advocate, when you are talking about an ombudsman? What type of a timeline do you have?
Okay. Well, let me say that we are in agreement with the governor's office. We've had more than one session already so far with all the particular players. You think about employee labor, Department of Health. Folks have invested, leadership has invested in their time. The executive branch has put folks in, and the folks in DMAVA have provided. There is ongoing work. People have said to me, "You're going to try to get it done in lame duck." No, we're going to wait till we get it done right. So my expectation is that we would move this bill relatively early in the new session. But in Trenton talk, Laura, and I know you're familiar with it, I don't want to do a cleanup bill. None of us want to do a cleanup bill because we missed something. We want to vet it. We're not looking to take prisoners here or to blame the past. What we're looking to do is to make sure that we have corrective action that moves forward the right way for a long period of time.
Senator O'Brien, thank you so much for being so candid and for talking to us about this issue, and we appreciate your time.
Laura, always a pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you. We have an election coming up in November, the first Tuesday in November. All 120 seats in the state legislature are up, but it really isn't getting a lot of coverage. But we didn't forget about it, just because there are other headlines making news and scandals dominating. Nor did my guest. Micah Rasmussen is the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University and an adjunct professor in Rider's Department of Political Science. He's also former press secretary to former Governor Jim McGreevey, handled crisis communications, among many other responsibilities. Micah, it's good to see you.
You too, Laura. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the key issues that will be driving the upcoming legislative elections in New Jersey.
Sure. So we know that of all of the 4 years in our election cycle, this is going to be the year with the lowest turnout. When the legislature is at the top of the ticket, you don't have a draw like president or like governor. And so we could be looking at something under 30% turnout, which is kind of crazy to think about. But so far, the number of votes by mail that have been received is hanging in there. We've got about what we had at this time during the governor's race. So that's good news. It either means that there's more interest this year or there's just more adopters into that vote by mail program. So we're hoping that the bottom doesn't fall out in terms of voter participation this year. Yeah, well, Democrats want you to focus on abortion rights. They know that that's an issue that is playing very well for them nationally, that Republicans, they view as wanting to take the rights of women to have self-determination away. And so they are trying to motivate their voters to vote on the basis of that issue. For Republicans, They're hoping to get voters out to the polls with that low turnout based on issues around parental notification in schools and parental involvement in schools. They are also talking about the steep price, maybe too high of a price for renewable energy. They're hoping to motivate people on those kinds of issues this year. And we'll see who does a better job of turning out their base. That's the name of the game this year in a low turnout election, is who can motivate more of their voters to come out.
And these are very emotional issues we're talking about when it comes to women's rights, abortion, when we're talking about children and parents and schools, really, really emotional topics. And it's a place where you can have a lot of misinformation spread quite rapidly through social media. What are your thoughts on
That's a
the role
really,
that plays?
really good point. I think it's an excellent point. And I think we're at that point where the parties have both decided that that is how you go right to the heart of whether or not you're going to motivate somebody to vote. This can be an election where people can just as easily opt out. And so you're right. The parties are trying to tug at heartstrings. They are trying to tug at what they believe is the real motivator to get their base to come out and vote. And yeah, I mean, the Republicans want to say that Democrats are playing up abortion in a way that it's not really at threat in New Jersey, that it's not threatened. Personally, I think that there is something to the idea of whether or not you want to elect a pro-choice legislature and pro-choice legislative leaders to put them in power, or pro-life legislative leaders. I think that's a very real question. So while abortion rights may not be immediately threatened in New Jersey, I do think it's a fair question to ask. You're right, on the price of energy, on whether or not the whales and the dolphins are dying because of the sonar soundings to explore the ocean beds, that's a real question. Whether or not parental rights, anybody's trying to take away parental rights and parental notification, that is an emotional heartstring issue. And it is subject to a lot of misinformation, misinterpretation as well. I think if we're being charitable to everybody, we say that they're talking about whether or not there's the potential for parents to not be notified of whether or not a student is transgender and comes out as transgender. I think we would all agree that 99 times out of 100, the parent, the family, is going to be the most supportive environment for a student to figure out their lives and who they are. We're talking about those very rare cases probably where telling a parent could threaten that child. And so we're not talking about the vast majority of cases. We're not talking about put yourself in this position and what would you do. We're talking about really situations that are very bad, home life that's very bad. And so that tends to be blown up into something where we're trying not to notify any parent of anything. That's not the case.
Right, and by design. I mean, this is the message. This is what campaign strategies are about: is to put that fear into people, which will motivate people then to get out to the polls.
Worst case scenario instead of everyday example. Yeah. Exactly. Go
Okay.
right to the where your mind is going to be motivated to come out and vote.
Right. Well, can you talk a little bit about the races that might be considered the most competitive in the state and why they are competitive?
Yeah. So in the South, you have had a contraction. We've seen a contraction of the South Jersey Democratic machine, the Norcross machine. They are back at their base in Camden County and that surrounding area. So that means that the outlying areas like Gloucester County are in play for the first time in many years. And Republicans are making a play in the 4th legislative district, that Gloucester County district. South Jersey has tended to be a little bit more conservative than the rest of the state. And so Republicans think that they can do well there. They're making plays the Democrats are trying to win back that Ed Durr seat that Steve Sweeney lost a couple of years ago. Less clear that they can make up that ground. We'll see. Another big race is in Monmouth County, where Senator Vin Gopal is running for re-election. This is the only split district in the entire state where there's a Democratic state senator, and 2 state Republican state assembly members. And so both sides are trying to finish the job, win over what they haven't won over. And so that's a competitive district, and he's fighting for his life there. The third major area of contention is District 16, which is Senator Andrew Zwicker's district. This is Princeton, South Brunswick, some of the northwestern, central western parts of the state along the Delaware River. And he's being challenged by Mike Pappas, a former Republican congressman. This is a district that always seems to be in play, but Zwicker is winning by fairly comfortable margins, so I'm not sure how much at play it is. And then Republicans are also making a play in Bergen County, and they're trying to win over some districts there. So the answer to your question as to why is because the Republicans have to put this many seats in play in order to make an attempt to win back a majority in either house. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are the odds-on favorites for this many seats, but they've got to have this many seats in play in order to have a shot at winning control back.
Micah, Democrats have control of the Senate, the Assembly, the governor's office, obviously. How do you think the outcome of the elections could impact the balance of power in the state legislature? How likely do you think that we could see a shift and Republicans could gain control of one or both houses? Is that even a reality or a possibility?
It's definitely a possibility. They are playing to get back. Republicans are playing to get back control of one or both chambers. I don't think it's the likeliest outcome. I think that the likeliest outcome is that they eat away further at the Democrats' margins in both houses. Maybe they win a district or two. They come within striking distance, but there's probably not quite enough seats in play. Let's put it this way, Laura. They'd have to win everything that's on the board. Republicans have to win everything, and Democrats have to lose everything. And I don't really think that that's probably what we're looking at. Where the surprise could come in these low turnout elections is if Republicans really have motivated their voters with some of those issues that we talked about at the outset of the program. If that's who shows up and Democrats don't show up, that's when you could get a surprise result. For example, like in 2021, where Murphy won the election, but by a much smaller margin than expected, his voters didn't show up and Republicans did. So that's how you can get an unexpected result.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the issues that are facing New Jersey residents across the board, like cost of living, the legislature, they're not in right now. They're all running for re-election. I don't think they're in until sometime in November. Then they'll have a lame duck session.
Right.
Then they'll have a new legislature. How do you think that they can, or are they addressing the issues not only that they're talking about, but some of those overarching issues like the cost of living? It is a fortune to live in New Jersey.
It's a great question, and the Democrats who control the legislature and the governor's office have instituted or partially instituted this anchor program, which is going to provide additional rebates for your property taxes. In fact, the promise is to cut your property taxes in half if you're a senior in New Jersey. And this is one that they have started to implement. Checks are going to be coming out right before the election, time-honored tradition in New Jersey, with promises of more to come. The question is, how much does that move voters? How much does voters, are they convinced that the check is not only in the mail, which they're getting, but also the check to come is on its way? So clearly a big part of the agenda that the Democrats are running on this year.
Yeah. Now, I know that this particular issue is fluid, but it is out there, and that is the investigation, the federal investigation into Senator Bob Menendez. Bob Menendez, how do you think, or will it impact the upcoming legislative elections in New Jersey? Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so I think if you had asked me this question before the speaker debacle, the speaker getting removed, I would have said that the Menendez piece by itself is an unmitigated disaster for Democrats. You don't want to tarnish your brand right before the election, especially in your own state. However, I think that the inability of House Republicans to govern right now, they don't even have a speaker, they seem to be unable to come up with one, I think is a pox on their House as well. And I think that the brand is probably tarnished for them too. And so I don't think it's going to wind up helping either party that they have these messes on their hands nationally. It's not going to reflect well. It's probably not going to motivate any of their own voters to come out. It'll suppress some of their voters, I think.
Yeah, I mean, because there is a trust issue in general And like you said, it isn't just about Bob Menendez. There is a lot of drama going on in the House. And is that drama in D.C., is that filtering down to New Jersey and impacting, again, maybe some of these swing districts where Republicans think that they can take over or Democrats are holding on for dear life?
It's a great question, Laura. And right now in our politics, Tip O'Neill used to say all politics is local. Right now, we kind of want to say that all politics is national, because that's what people are thinking about. They're thinking about Biden versus Trump. They're thinking about Republican versus Democrat. It's all about which party is in power. People understand the stakes that are involved, and people are really very polarized right now and pulling one lever or the other. So it's a time when, if you want to be disappointed with Menendez, which many people are, then you are either going to not show up for the Democrats, or you're going to pull that Republican lever. If you're disappointed with the House Republicans and the mess that we see in Washington, then you are either going to be unmotivated to come out and vote for the Republicans, or you are going to be motivated to cast that opposite ballot. We don't often think about federal issues as having an impact on our state elections, but that's really what's on the mind of voters. It's what they see every day and the national implications of what they see every day. And so more often than not, it's definitely got something to do with whether or not they come out to vote.
All right, Micah Rasmussen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to talk a little bit more about the upcoming elections. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Laura, as always.
Yep. And that will do it for today. Thank you so much for watching New Jersey Politics. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.